a special honor to be with you guys today. It's, as Lee was reading off the list of people that are on here, I started getting more and more nervous. So to my friends and colleagues, be kind to me. To those of you who don't know me, I'm a practicing dentist. I have had 5 weeks ago, I had a full-time practice here in Atlanta, Georgia, and coming to you live from the war room, which is my basement. It's the only quiet place in the house, and it's only quiet until the kids come down to bother me. But so I'll apologize on the front end if the dog runs by or the kids run by. This is the new normal. What I wanted to talk about, my title today is COVID-19, one more reason to go digital. And as Lee and I were chatting before we came on, we don't know when we're going back. We will go back. This is going to end. There's going to be an end to this thing. We know that. It may be in a month and it may be in a year, and somewhere in between is probably the right number, and we just don't know. One of the things that is going to hit us is, well, what's it going to look like when we go back? So, you know, are we going to have different or new regulations that we need to, you know, how are we going to practice and keep our team safe? How are we going to keep us safe? Everything we do is aerosolized. It's in the mouth. It gets contaminated immediately. We do as good or better of a job as any industry at minimizing the risk of cross-contamination of our patients. I don't have any way to quantify this, but I would bet dollars to donuts, we have not had a single case of a patient who caught something from a previous patient in the 22 years that I've been practicing dentistry. Now, can I prove that? No, but I would say unless they hugged out in the waiting room, because we do a great job. Everything gets disinfected and sterilized and covered and wiped and re-wiped, and we already do a great job of that. What we do a lousy job with is managing the aerosols and the saliva splatter and all of that. And so I am certain that we're going to end up with something. I don't know what something is. I wish somebody was talking about it, but you know, we don't know. So is this what it's going to look like? This is, somebody sent this to me. I don't even remember where it came from, but it's like a PVC frame set over the patient's head with what I would think is saran wrap over the patient, and our hands are underneath that saran wrap, keeping us isolated from the patient. I don't know about you guys, but I couldn't imagine doing a really you know, fine detailed prep of a margin, or trying to get to a second molar, or sculpting a class 4 composite on number 8 with a piece of saran wrap in front of me. I don't know. I don't know how that's going to look. But think about, and my focus today is digital dentistry, but you know, my story starts way back. I was in school at the University of Florida for undergrad. I got a degree in having too good of a time, and after 2 years, I left the University of Florida. And after a little sabbatical, I went back to school and got my bachelor's degree in computer science. That actually is, I have a bachelor's degree in computer science from American International College in Springfield, Massachusetts. It's small. But when I left there, and it was in my senior year, decided to go to dental school. I wasn't always on that track. And I did end up at the University of Florida College of Dentistry. And when I got my degree, everything was analog. The idea of doing digital dentistry didn't even exist yet. So, you know, I had this computer background, which, by the way, there was no World Wide Web. There was no email. Email was something that the military used to communicate. That was about it. Windows hadn't yet been invented. Microsoft Windows wasn't invented yet. So this is like early stages of computers. And then you get out of dental school and everything's analog. So I started getting interested in the digital world really, it's probably now 14 years ago, I think. The first CIRAC had been released, and which was lousy. And there were starting to be some other scanning technology on the horizon. A lot of it was more on the lab side of things. So you would scan a model that a doctor would send the lab, and then they could work on a digital platform. And most of it was workaround stuff because they didn't even have good software yet. And the way it started was, I said there's got to be a better way because of the inconsistency of elastomeric impressions. So I don't care if you take an alginate, I don't care if you take hydrocolloid, I don't care if you take polyether, polyvinyl, polyrazzmatazz, that material, every material, distorts. It may shrink, it may swell, it may do any number of things. Then we pour it up in stone, even if you use the best dye stone with a vacuum mixer and all the things we do, we know that those materials expand and contract. And there's so many variables. It's actually a wonder that we ever get anything to fit. When you think about it, with the amount of distortion that occurs, it's really, it's mind-boggling. And yet we manage to have amazing restorations, mostly because the labs understand what is the average amount of distortion and they fudge factor for it. So put that aside for a minute, let's talk about the cross-contamination issue. You take an impression out of the mouth and you send it to the lab, you have to disinfect that. We know that, and there's ways that we do that. Well, I suspect that with the current situation that we're in, first of all, dentistry is going to be held under a microscope and scrutinized more than any other industry and profession. I know it. I know it's going to happen. And by the way, everything I'm saying today is my opinion. It's all I've got. There's no science to any of what I'm telling you. This is all my opinion, my experience, but I think it's worth thinking about. And so, we don't know what it's going to look like, but I suspect there's going to be very strict and stringent protocols on things like elastomeric impressions. What do you have to do to this thing before it can leave the operatory? I don't mean take it into your lab and disinfect it. I mean, those operatories may be hermetically sealed with negative pressure vacuums in them and all kinds of things. And who knows what they're going to make us do, but it's probably we need to. Well, guess what? With a digital impression, there's zero risk of saliva getting from my scanner into the lab. It can't happen. The sleeve that goes in the patient's mouth is disposable. So that's easy, that's great. And as soon as you scan somebody, guess what? That thing's digitized. It can't distort. So even if you were to argue that, well, maybe it's not as accurate as a well-made, polyvinyl siloxane impression with a custom tray and everything perfect. Once you add in all the distortion factor, I think what you find is you get more consistency. If I scan somebody 10 times and I make something on one of those scans, it's going to fit all the other ones the same. If I take 10 impressions of something and make something on one of them, it isn't going to fit all 10 of them. You know it. It doesn't. And if you think it does, try it, because I did that. So what I did when I went on my journey for looking at digital, and all I wanted to do was get something that I was already doing in the analog world and remove the distortion factor. So we started looking at all these scanners, and they brought me a CIRAC machine. I had it in the office one day. I said, get it out of here. It was not very good. And it was all about the mill. It wasn't about the scanning. And then I flew to Dallas, Texas, and I went to see the E4D unit, and it was all about the milling unit. It wasn't hardly about the scanner. In fact, what they had us do, which made no sense, was we prepped a model on a lab bench, and then we took an impression of that, and then we scanned the impression, which it didn't make any sense to me. I didn't want to be in the lab business. I love working with my lab. I wanted a just better way to make an impression. So fast forward, at that time, all I had was those three: CIRAC, E4D, and Itero. So Itero came and brought me one of their units, and we played with it, and it weighed about 40 pounds in your hand, the scanner. It was huge, but it did the job. And we did some in-office testing of it. We took impressions of prep teeth and scanned prep teeth and had the lab make double sets of restorations. And we loved the fit of everything on the digital. What that led me to was finding out that my crown seating appointments, veneer seating appointments, onlay seating appointments for any restoration, same lab, same materials. The only difference was we traded out impressions for scans, cut the time in half. So whatever time it would take me to deliver a case, half as long with restorations made from scans. That was pretty compelling. So we, went into it head first at that time. That was 12 years ago, I guess. And we've been scanning restorations ever since. Today, where am I now? I've got 2 iTeras. We've got the new Element 2, and we have 2 of them because we're using them for so much more. So not only are we scanning all of our restorations and our implant cases, we're also using it for our bite splints. We're using it for diagnostics. So I scan every new patient. It's brilliant because I can bring it right up. I can show a patient. I can get models from that if I need something physical in my hand. There's so much I can do, and I can store it. I can store it forever, and it takes no room in my office. I mean, I was going to have to blow a wall out and add another room to store all the models that we had. And now I don't even think about it. We just throw models away because if I ever need it, it's in the scanner. It's in the cloud. It's all saved. So I can always go back and recreate a model if I need to from any stage of treatment. The other thing we're doing with it, and of course, Invisalign, I should comment on that. We'll talk about ortho in a minute. So all of our Invisalign is being scanned on there. And we do some minor ortho movement with our Invisalign. But what else am I doing? Well, we're scanning hygiene patients. It's part of our regular diagnostic protocol. On the opposite appointment of when they would be updating x-rays. So let's say 6 months ago, we saw a patient and we had updated their vertical bite wing series or whatever. And then now this time we're seeing them, we're gonna do an iTero scan. And what do I do with that? Well, I might just leave it up and let the patient look at it. If there's something interesting to look at, I'll point it out to them. But more importantly is if I have an older scan, I can compare it. If I don't have an older scan, then this becomes the baseline. And now a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now, I can take additional scans, and it has the ability, the software has the ability to overlay a previous scan and a new scan, and you can look at changes. And it is unbelievable when you show a patient how their teeth have shifted, how their teeth have worn, how their teeth have cracked. Because these things happen slowly. And we say to a patient, oh, have you noticed any change in that crooked tooth or in that worn tooth? Nope, looks the same. Well, we know it wasn't the same as when it first erupted. And so we're using it as a tool for tracking changes and being able to show patients those changes. And it's really, really been powerful. So we added the second one this last year specifically for the hygienists to use. And so the hygienists do those scans. And by the way, so state by state, there may be different regulations on who restorative scans. So in Georgia, there's not any actual law about it. So even on a final, final impression, final scan of a prep tooth, my assistant can do that scan. Now, I need to go in and check the scan, but here's what's brilliant. They do the scan, I come back, I check it, I look at something and I go, I don't like the way that looks. And it's on a big screen. It's not in a little teeny impression that I have to look at in a microscope. I can see it clear as day. What is it? It's something that I missed on my prep. It's a margin that needs to be smoothed out. It's occlusal reduction because it has a way of telling you what the occlusal reduction is. I don't have enough reduction. I can go in and I can smooth that margin. I can adjust the occlusal reduction and go in and just add an additional scan. It's not a whole new impression. It's right then and there, and it's saving so much time, and we're so much more accurate. By the way, when you look at your preps on a huge, I don't know, whatever they're 20-something inch screen, guess what? Your preps are going to get better. It is going to happen.
Hey, Daren, a couple of questions that came in. One you may get to later, which I think you're about to, is somebody's just curious about printing and if you print in your office. But the relevant question right now is whether or not you charge your patients for the scan, how you code it. If it's in hygiene and it's not part of a restorative procedure, are you putting it in your software system?
It's a great question. So we are putting it into our Dentrix software as a diagnostic cast. It's the same thing as taking an alginate and pouring it up. Now, whether you charge for it or not, that's your business. Right now, we're not charging for it. And it's probably in my head more than anything. Do I charge for oral hygiene instruction? No. Do I charge for oral cancer screening? No. So we have a fee for our hygiene visit, and I do charge for x-rays. I don't know why. I think we might actually look at changing that. So it's a great question, Lee. It's something we struggle with because we weren't sure how we want to do it, but we do put it in the software because I want to be able to track it. In my office, I know if it says diagnostic cast, that was a scan, because we just hardly ever do an alginate. And in fact, I'm not doing alginates for diagnostic purposes. So diagnostic scan in my mind means an iTero scan, and so we know when we started that, and we can go back and look at it. The printing question is a great question. So yes, I have a 3D printer. This is my printer. It's an EvoDent E120. It prints amazingly. I'm so impressed with a desktop printer that I have in my office that can print models, it can print provisionals, it can print surgical guides. I've printed some goofy things. It's really pretty cool. Do I print everything? No, I really still rely on my lab for most things. But, well, we'll talk about, I was gonna talk about it later, but so here's a really cool way to use a printer. We do a diagnostic scan. We take all of the other records that we would normally take. So this, by the way, none of this replaces the basic principles that we all understand about restorative dentistry. It doesn't take away anything else. So it's just replacing the impression. Now, the lab does their wax up, digital design wax up. They send me screenshots of that. If there's stuff we don't like, we'll go on a live team viewer meeting, and I can literally guide them and say, hey, can we change this or change that? We can check the occlusion, we can do all that. Now, here's the cool part. Instead of them having to then print out the models in their lab and send them to me for me to be able to then do something like make a matrix to use in the mouth, they just send me the file of the wax up, and I can print the model in my office and make the Siltec.
Sorry, I'm not sure about that.
Weird. And I can make the Siltec in my office to then bring it to the, so it's saving time and steps and shipping costs and cost, because the lab, everything they're doing now is just virtual. They're not till we get to the final restorations. They're not having to go through all of that model work, and it's really pretty cool. This company, by the way, EvoDent, if you go look for it, they seem to have disappeared. My understanding is they were bought by some Japanese company, I think. Maybe it's a Chinese company, I don't know. So I've lost all my support for my printer. It still works. But I'm not sure what the future of this company is. There are so many good printing companies out there, and it changes daily. I was excited for Hinman this year to be able to go and look at the new stuff. and no Hinman happened. So anyway, the printer has been a great addition to the office, and it's really, everybody says it takes so long to print something. Not any longer than it does to watch a die stone set. Well, but it's expensive. It's not any more expensive. The resin is expensive if you just look at the cost of the resin, but when you take away the cost of your impression materials and your custom tray materials and your stone material, I mean, we haven't bought stone in forever, and my lab is so clean because we hardly pour up models for anything. Even if we're doing whitening trays, we scan them, we print the models, and we make the trays. So it's really been great. Did that answer your question? I'll assume yes. Okay.
Sorry, I'm popping in here, Daren. I think that answered the question about printer.
Okay.
There was one or two more. So folks were curious about a price range for in-office printer. I don't know if you know the answer to that.
So you can get a reasonable printer for around $3,500. They're okay. If all you want to do is print like, diagnostic casts, they're great. I think you're more into the maybe $6,000 to $10,000 range when you're starting to want to print provisionals and print more detailed models. If you're going to print die models, for sure. Yeah, that's pretty much the range I think that I'm aware of. So let's talk about other things that we can use digital for. And if this is a Pankey meeting here, we have to talk about bite splints. And here's just two. Basically, bite splints are awesome. If that's all I did with it, it would still be amazing. There's no amount of, you cannot get your glass bowl cold enough and mix your powder and liquid dense enough to get it as dense as you can a milled PMMA, polymethyl methacrylate acrylic splint. They are unbelievable. You can polish them smoother than glass, and the fit is ridiculous. Right out of the mill, they fit so well. Everybody gets excited about splints, and we all have our personal opinions, but I love what my dad always used to say: there's no magic healing power in methyl methacrylate. It's how well it fits and how you adjust it and how you keep adjusting it. And so I don't care how you make your splint. I don't care what it's made out of. As long as it meets the criteria of being stable, retentive, and you get the occlusion adjusted properly on it, you're going to get what you want. And so, most of us that made our own splints for a long time, and I made thousands of them, I relined every splint. Every splint was relined. Why do we reline splints? Is it because we love giving uncured acrylic to our patients? Probably not. Stuff's horrible. We reline them because the distortion factor of the acrylic when it sets, we have to do all this stuff to block it out. It's all these things we do to just make the thing. To get it to fit right, you had to reline it. Well, what if you could do it in a way where there was no distortion? If you could make it fit as well as a crown, well, guess what? In the digital world, you can. So we have two ways that we make these. There's can milled splints. This is my preference. If I didn't tell you what this was, you would have said, oh, nice splint, somebody made that. This splint is made off of a hard lab manufactured acrylic puck, and it is milled very precisely. And you can adjust them the same way you adjust any other splint. So we're not going to get into the technique of that, but the internal surface of these things is so accurate. More often what I find is if we haven't digitally blocked out all the undercuts properly, they fit too well, and you have to relieve them a little bit because they're just so accurate. And in terms of how these are done, here's a quick video of a splint on a set of models. You can see we can mount models on our articulator. The articulator can actually be adjusted, and we can track the model on that. And I hope this is showing up. I don't know how this is looking. Lee, if this is not looking good, let me know and I'll skip past it.
It looks great, Daren.
And what you'll see here in a second is you get the marks. What you can't seem to do is get different colors. So we have to start looking at things a little differently. I'm used to looking at a red and a green mark, but here we just have blue marks. And you know, anyway, you get to see what you got. And then they can adjust it digitally before they mill the thing. So really just an amazing bit of technology. And this is the puck that it comes out of. So this thing gets put into the mill, and then it mills out these splints. They have to be, they're like sprued, if you want to call it that. And they have to cut those off and trim them off and then just, you know, polish them. You can then put these on printed models that have been mounted if you're so inclined. And we did that for a while. And you can fine tune the occlusion on the models on the articulator the way we're used to. I still like doing that sometimes if I feel like I need to learn more about the patient's occlusion. But if I don't feel like it's a very complex case and we get it back from the lab, I'm not even checking them on models because I just go to the mouth, I drop them in, they fit amazing. And we go to town with our adjustments in the mouth, which are typically minimal. If anything, I'm finding I'm having to putz around a little bit with them just to create the experience for the patient and being able to have that you know, bonding time that we all love with our patients. But the reality is they adjust very quickly, again, because there was no distortion.
All right, Daren, there are tons of questions about this.
Okay, gotta go.
So, you know, and I have to tell you, I mean, we actually transitioned the splint adjustment exercise in our Essentials 1 class out to printed models and a printed splint. And it's phenomenal, and you can replicate it a bazillion times. So if a patient loses a splint, you just go in and replicate it. One question is, who's milling your splints? Are you willing to share what laboratory you're using to get these done?
I am under strict orders not to reveal that CMR, Matt Roberts' lab is milling these. I don't think it's a business they want to be in right now. And so I don't know that they're taking new clients to do that. I think they do it for me because I send all my restorative work to them. So
Gotcha.
well, I can't tell you that, but lots of places are doing them. And honestly, in any lab that is you know, geared up for milling splints to do this, here's where you run into the trouble. We have to train the lab to design a splint that fits our particular nuances. Everybody says they make a Pankey splint, or they make a Tanner splint, or they make a whoever splint. Well, I've seen a whole bunch of them from different people that all look very different, that they all call the same thing. And none of them are wrong. It's just we all have our little quirks. And so that's the part of transitioning to this model, is being able to say, this is how I want my splints to look. This is what I'm looking for. This is what's important. Thickness, shape, occlusion, whatever. But I mean, the big labs, Glidewell and what's the other big one? Great Lakes. I think they make them. May not be the splint you're looking for, but I know they do.
Yeah, Dental Ceramics in Ohio, which is John Levichka's lab, is doing most of the milling for the Pankey Institute these days. Phil Gold is on the webinar, so I don't know if his lab there in Atlanta is doing this yet, but if you are, Phil, you can pop it in the chat box and I'll share it with people. So next question, and there were actually a bunch of these, was what software are your appliances being designed in? And how are you actually getting the mounting onto a digital articulator? Are you taking analog records first?
So great questions. Let me address the first one first, is the software. The answer to the question is, I don't know. The lab is using some splint design software. There's a few of them out there and I'm not familiar with them. I have designed a few, like 4, in my office using Blue Sky plan software. It's a free software for surgical guides. And I found a video on YouTube, which is how we find out how to do everything, that showed how to use their software and fake it out to make a splint. And I did, and I printed it, and it was awesome. But it took forever, probably because I didn't know the software very well. So for me, I'm just as happy to have the lab make them. And I don't love the printed ones as much as I do the milled ones. So there's nothing wrong with the printed ones. And we finally have some better resins. The early ones that we did were very brittle, and they weren't as consistent, because what do you have to do with a printed bite splint after you've made it is it has to go in a curing box, light box, and I think there may be some distortion there. So I don't know that I love those as much, the printed ones. The other question was, what was the other question? I already forgot.
Software and whether or not you start with analog models in
Right.
order to get it on the digital
Yes. Right.
system.
So the answer is yes and no. We started out where we were sending a FaceBo or a dental facial analyzer and a bite, a centric relation bite record, with the way we always learned it in originally Pankey with the DLR wax and the Skylar wax. We did that for a while, and then we started realizing that we could do it without. And the way we do it without is with a photograph. And what the lab can do is they can digitally mount the upper model on the digital articulator with the photograph. And it's quite accurate, actually. And then with that, plus the knowledge that we have from the dental facial analyzer and that 100 millimeter magic number, whatever that is, they can pretty much get these almost dead on. And then what we're doing in lieu of a centric bite record is we're taking a digital bite record. We're scanning the patient's bite with a anterior deprogrammer, either a Pankey bite stop or something that we can put in the front, have the patient slide forward, slide back, slide forward, slide back, squeeze, and we'll scan them at the open vertical of the thickness of the splint that we want to design. So what does that mean? It means, number one, the lab doesn't have to change vertical dimension. So even if it's slightly out of centric relation, which we try to get it in centric relation, but well, even with a bite record, you might not. But since we're not altering the vertical dimension on the software, where we are is where we are. And so it works out really well. So today we're not really doing any analog records. We did for a while, and then we realized we didn't have to. So, and that, I think that's going to continue to improve with different things that we have for ways of using like a digital photograph to mount the case. And we do that with our restorative cases now too. It's incredible. Okay, moving on. We're going to get away from splints. Ortho, we know that I know that a large percentage of the group here is doing aligners for limited tooth movement, or some of y'all are doing them for more advanced tooth movement. For the longest time when I had a case, we're working on an upper anterior restoration. Lower, you have one lateral that's sticking out 2 millimeters to the facial. Oh, if we could just push that tooth in. And I was doing, Dr. Kincaid had taught me to use just like a little holly, and we would add pressure by adding acrylic and just hand did it. And it worked great. It was laborious and whatever. Today with aligner therapy, it's so easy, it's so fast that we're able to do that. And if you're taking your impression and sending it to Invisalign, that's great, it's fine, but you still have that distortion factor. So I don't know what the number is, but I've heard stories of, 1 out of 10 cases, 1 out of 20 cases, the aligners come back and they just don't fit right. And it's because of that distortion of the impression. We scan all of our Invisalign cases. There's a huge advantage there also in terms of the software. Some of the things we can do in the software, like show a patient a simulation immediately, which is incredible to be able to do. The power of being able to do that's unreal. And everything fits. I mean, I've not had one, knock on wood, that doesn't fit. So that's really been a great thing. And if you're, let's say you're doing a more complex Invisalign case and you've got 30 trays or whatever it is, and you're on number 15 and you're going to put number 16 in and it's not quite going in, something's not right, something's not tracking right. They have a thing in the software, I can scan the patient right then and run a analysis, and it'll tell me where are the teeth relative to where we thought they would be at this stage and which tooth isn't tracking properly. Really cool. And then if you need to, order new trays from that point, they've got that streamlined really well. So using it for aligners is, to me, a big deal. I don't do any bracket ortho in my office, but I know lots of people do. This is something that I'm aware of. I don't know enough about it, but where they can use this technology to basically place their brackets in a very controlled way, as opposed to hand placing them, I guess. And then digital ortho wire design. This is really cool. This happens to be Sure Smile, but there are other companies out there doing this. It's basically Invisalign on steroids. They do some initial level and aligning, and then when they're ready to detail the case, they're going to the more thicker rectangular wires. They scan the patient, and they can move the teeth the same way we do in Invisalign, and then a robotic arm bends this special wire very, very precisely. So it takes away all of the back and forth that the last, I'll say, third to a half of ortho time takes. I want to move this tooth out a little bit. Well, what do? You put a bend in the wire, but now these two teeth move the other way. This takes all that out. It's really brilliant. And with this software and others like it, like I said, you can do all kinds of things. Like if we think we're going to come back later and do restorations, and I want to space out teeth a certain way because we're going to make the centrals a little wider, let's say. Well, we can simulate that in the software, do all the ortho planning with that, get the ortho done, and the teeth are right where I would want them to be for ideal restoration. You can overlay these with CBCTs, so you can see the bone, you can see everything, and it's really brilliant. We use this in our treatment planning a ton, and I'm going to touch on that here in a second. So let's move on to restorative, because that's what most of us do. And to me, this is where the power of this stuff is. Diagnostics, like I already talked about. This is a printed model. You can see the tertiary anatomy is so good. Today, you don't get that sort of wood grain look that we used to get with some of these printed things. I put them up against the best die model, and they're so durable. You drop it, you pick it up, nothing happened to it. Try that with a stone model. It's really impressive. And if you are so inclined to still want to work, on things in an analog world, well, you can take these printed models. These happen to be milled models from Mytero, and you can mount them on your articulator. Just use them like models the same way. You can use a Facebook, you can use a CR bite record. You can do all the things that you do with a poured stone model, only, in my opinion, in a more consistent manner because of the lack of distortion. Digital design, and I don't know, many of you maybe have used or tried the digital smile design, Christian Coachman's product. It's brilliant. It's what we've been doing for years, but was very proprietary because only a few people had the training to do it. And now he's made it something that anyone can do. I don't use his product. I don't get any money from him for talking about his product. I don't use it because we have our own. Matt Roberts does that, and his team with Mike, his son. They do all of that for us, but we can take a patient who has concerns, comes to me, his main concern, chief concern is the appearance of his teeth. He's got uneven wear pattern. And this isn't about the details of this case, but you know, we can do a wax up, a digital smile design. I can you know, take this same information now and give the lab my feedback if there's any changes we would want to make. By the way, yes, the color is not great. That's probably the one lagging piece of thing in the software, is that the digital wax up, they look like porcelain instead of, I don't know what, but we're playing with that, but it doesn't matter. I'm not looking at color here. I'm looking at shape and size and occlusion and function and symmetry and all of those things. So that's been huge. I mean, to be there with the lab when they're waxing up your case, wouldn't you love to do that? Well, now we can. So, wait a minute. And then with our interdisciplinary team, so some of these are really complex cases, right? And we're working with our endodontist and our oral surgeon, our orthodontist, our periodontist, and Iron Man. This is in my orthodontist office, and we have these regular meetings. Any of you who know me, you know I talk about this a lot. I think the power of the growth of my practice has 100% been working with our interdisciplinary team. And what we can do in here with the digital world, you see everybody's got their laptop out, we got the big flat screen TV, and we're discussing cases together, and using the digital technology, they can pull the models up on the screen. We can modify things. Somebody says, well, what if we do this? Or what if we do that? And we can simulate it and you know, get a much more accurate and I think better diagnosis and treatment plan because of the ability to communicate with this technology. The lab communication is so amazing. What you're looking at here is a cross section. The little picture in the bottom right is a cross section through that tooth with the wax up in place. So the sort of gold shape around there is the planned restoration. The blue shape is the existing tooth. And we can see where we're going to have a problem, where that's going to be sticking out. We may have to change that. And we can communicate that. We can know it up front. Here, this is kind of cool. I think this will blow up. Let me see. Yeah, it does. What you're looking at is the wax up over the healing abutments of these two implants. And what we were looking at is, where is the screw going to come through? And you know, on the patient's right side, it's going to come through the embrasure. And that was just because that's all they could do, I guess. I kind of inherited this case, but it doesn't matter. So the planning part of this is so cool, because we can change the opacity of the wax up and see what's under it. You can't do that with real wax. So really, really powerful stuff. And even things like, are we going to do this with 3 larger incisors or 4 smaller incisors? Well, if you wanted to wax that up, you have to wax it up twice. Well, in the digital world, you can do it in 5 minutes. You know, look at different things like that. So really, really powerful for communicating with the lab. And with the patient, guess what I do? Whoops, guess what I do? I show the patient that picture before we ever started. And he gets to preview where we think we're going. Super powerful. That's the motivating factor for some patients, is to see what's possible. Oh, I never knew that was possible, they'll say. Now, the rubber meets the road with the actual, now we're going to take digital stuff and turn it into analog stuff. And we can mill or print provisionals that are really nice. This happens to be a milled PMMA overlay. This is a ectodermal dysplasia kid. She's 16. And we had these milled by the lab, and we bonded them in while we're waiting for her to finish growing and she can get some implants and so forth. Some of you have seen the case, but damn, those are nice, aren't they? I don't think I can get my acrylic or my bisacryl to look that good and last. These are in now for several years. She's getting close to that age, and they're super strong, way more strong than the bisacryls for sure. So, you know, that's something that you can do it off of analog, but I don't think it's as good because of the distortion factor. Die models we talked about. If you want to still make your restorations the old-fashioned way, you still can. You can get die models made. These models are amazing. The dies they fit into these little sleeves so that you don't have to get rid of all the tissue. It's all right there, and the dies don't move. When you put them in there, they are solid. And with implants, using this technology with implants, we can make surgical guides. This has changed the world for us with implants, planning things out, being able to have provisionals already ready to go if that's appropriate. And if not, being able to have custom healing abutments ready to go. It's really making implants a lot of fun. And digital impressions with implants. It's unbelievable to be able to scan what they call a scan body. It's like an impression coping for a scanner, and it just makes this so easy and so much fun. So where are we? We got this COVID-19 thing, and by the way, I should have said this. I hope everybody's healthy, and I hope everybody is staying healthy and doing all the things we're supposed to do to stay that way. I should have said that from the beginning. But we are going to go back to work someday. And when we do, we're going to be faced with a whole lot of worried patients, worried team members about not wanting to get sick. And I believe that digital scanning is one of the ways that we can minimize our risk of cross-contamination. So first steps, well, decide if this is right for you. Go be well informed. Right now, everybody's really busy, but if you can fit it in your schedule, go online and start looking at some of the technology that's out there. And they're probably willing to deal really good right now. So maybe you're going to get your EIDL loan from the SBA because they're so generous now, and you use it to upgrade your practice. I don't know, but make the move to start getting well informed. I think this is kind of like high-speed handpieces. When they were going from belt-driven slow-speed handpieces, which we may all have to go back to so we don't have splatter. No, I'm just kidding. But the transition was slow at first, and then all of a sudden that was the norm, was high-speed handpieces. Well, digital x-rays, same thing. If anybody who used film x-rays and now uses digital x-rays, no, there's no comparison. The film x-rays, looking at a little square thing compared to a big screen like this, it's there's no comparison. I think this is going to be the same thing, because guess what? Not only is this, in my opinion, better, and not only is it more fun, patients like it better. They don't want goop in their mouth. And when you pull up this scanner and you start scanning, they see it, like, oh my God, that's so cool. Is that my mouth? And they want to see it, and they want to touch it, and they want to spin it around on the thing. And it's really, it's a practice grower for me as well. So patients, nobody's going around going, man, I love that impression. That was really cool. I had to have that stuff in my mouth for 5 minutes and I loved it. That doesn't happen. So make the first steps, because it's going to happen. And then implement it. Get with your team. Talk to your team about it. You got fired up because it was scary and there was concern about it and whatever, but they love it. They fight over that scanner. They want to scan. So it's really changed my practice in a positive way. I've joked about it a lot. If they ever took my scanner away, I would just quit. I couldn't go back. But that is my my sincere hope for everybody is, if this is something interesting to you, go do the homework and then just do it. Just do it. I am available if anybody has individual questions. I am happy to discuss this with anybody. I love talking about this stuff. I'll tell you what I know. I'll tell you what I don't know, and open it up to any other questions for right now.
Awesome. Hey, Daren, can you go back and remind people the photograph that you said you send when you do digital splint fabrication to help the lab do the mounting?
Oh. So yeah, so there's basically it's done with our digital SLR camera. It is a full face, full smile, exaggerated smile, so that they can see as many teeth back as they can. So it's kind of smile, now goofy grin, and I have them just open enough that there's space between the upper teeth and lower teeth. And that's so the lab can position the digital scan within the photo and on the articulator. So
Got it. And that's giving them planes of space, but they're using the assumption of 100 millimeters from the center of intercondylar axis, just like a DFA, to get hinge axis, correct?
Correct. That is correct. Now, the next thing is the Bellis 3D photograph, I guess, is pretty cool. I haven't really started using it. I've been playing with it a little bit. I talked to Matt last week about it. And it'll be an adjunct. He said it doesn't replace that photo. And when you're taking that front facial photo, this is important, digital or not. When especially if you're doing any type of anterior restorations, and you're sending your lab all these photos, when you look in the camera and you're looking at the patient in the frame, and you're doing that full face, full smile picture or a provisional picture, look at the ears, and assuming that they're not totally warped headed, make sure their ears aren't tipped one way or the other, left or right. Sometimes you look at a patient, you'll have to have ladies put their hair behind their ears. You look at a patient and you'll see all of one ear and none of the other ear. Their head's tipped to one side or tilted to turned to one side. So you want them as straight on as possible with that. And that's what's nice about the Bellis is you're getting a full 3D scan, and so the lab can position it any way they want.
So then a question came in, a follow-up of, do you use cotton rolls or something to help them keep their teeth apart, or do you just ask them to hold their teeth apart?
You mean for the photo?
Yeah.
No, I smile really big, and just slightly separate your teeth, open right there. And then if they open real big, you have to start over. But and I'm demonstrating it as I'm doing that.
Gotcha. Perfect. So, yeah, and I don't know if you had this, you've had this challenge, Daren, but I actually didn't really like the printed appliances because they actually got loose over time on the internal. It's almost like from popping them in and out, they wear really fast or something, and then they got really loose.
Yeah. I basically, like I said, I don't think they want to be in the milled splint business. If you remember from the picture of the puck, here, if you remember this picture, where's the puck? Sorry. Well, anyway, you can only get 2 splints. There it is. You can only get 2 splints out of one puck.
Yeah, and those pucks are $200.
And they're $200. And here's the other piece: the milling tool, the burr that's doing all the grinding, get beat up by this thing. I don't know. I think those are like $25 each. And so they can only get like 3 splints out of one burr before it's inaccurate. So they don't like doing it. And it ties up their mill from making, they can get whatever, 50 zirconia restorations in that same size puck. That's way more efficient for them. So they're charging a lot for it. But what it's saving me in time, what it's saving me in headaches, and what the patients are getting is so much better. I said, charge me the fair fee. What's it worth?
Yeah,
and we
exactly.
just add our fee, and it's zero in the cost factor. We adjusted our price because the printed ones weren't good enough.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, when I was at IDS last year, I actually got to see the new scanners that iTero and Plan Mecca are coming out with. They were supposed to come out this month here in the US, but my guess is that got delayed. That also do transillumination for intraoral caries detection. So like literally one camera, and you can do still photographs, the video scanning, impressions, transillumination for caries. They're both supposed to launch this year, but we'll see what happens. So the technology is just getting better and better and better.
Yes.
So,
sure.
Well, Lots and lots of thank yous, Daren. Lots of people singing your praises.
Bunch
So
of liars.
in the chat box.